I'm Maya Singh, 25, female. I live in a high-rise apartment with a view of the city lights, a place that always felt like a symbol of the life I'd built. As a data scientist, my world revolves around numbers, patterns, and logic, things that are predictable and make sense. It's a life I shared with my husband, Rahul, and a life I thought was perfect. But I was about to discover that the most dangerous variables are the ones you never think to question. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Our love story, or what I believed was one, started in college. Rahul was charming, ambitious, and radiated a confidence that was magnetic. He was a business major, always talking about climbing the corporate ladder, while I was buried in code and algorithms. We were opposites, but it worked. He drew me out of my shell, and I grounded him, or so I thought. We married 2 years after graduation in a beautiful ceremony funded mostly by my savings and a generous gift from my grandmother. We moved into our apartment, and life was good. He was a sales executive at a tech firm, and I was making a great name for myself at a leading analytics company. We had a routine. We'd have breakfast together, talk about our day over dinner, and spend weekends with friends or visiting his family. His mother, Sunita, was a constant presence in our lives. She was a traditional woman who, while polite to my face, always had a subtle way of reminding me that in her eyes I was the outsider. She'd compliment my cooking, then casually mention how Rahul preferred her version. She'd praise my career, but then sigh about how lonely the house must be all day. It was a slow drip of criticism, so subtle that whenever I mentioned it to Rahul, he'd dismiss it as me being too sensitive. That's just how Mom is. He'd say with a shrug. She means well. My grandmother was my rock. She was the one who encouraged my love for math, who paid for my first computer, and who always told me my brain was my greatest asset. When she passed away 6 months ago, it felt like a part of my foundation had crumbled. She left me her entire life savings, an inheritance of $200,000. It was a staggering amount, a testament to her quiet, frugal life. I was overwhelmed with grief and gratitude. My plan was to invest it wisely, maybe use a portion for a down payment on a house one day. A future I was building with Rahul. When I told him about the money, his eyes lit up in a way that, in hindsight, should have been a warning. He was ecstatic, but his excitement felt different from mine. Mine was emotional, his was purely financial. He immediately started making plans. We can finally get that new car, Maya, a real luxury one, not this compact thing, and my parents' kitchen is falling apart. We can finally help them renovate. I was taken aback. It's my grandmother's money, Rahul, I said gently. I want to be careful with it. He wrapped his arms around me, his tone softening. Of course, darling, our future. I just get excited. It's a huge blessing for us. I let it go, convincing myself his enthusiasm was for our shared life. But over the next few weeks, the we and us started to sound more and more like him and his family. The pressure was subtle at first. Sunita would call and talk for an hour about their leaking roof or the faulty wiring in their house. She'd sigh dramatically, saying how they just didn't know how they would ever afford the repairs. Rahul would then echo her concerns later that evening. I just feel so bad for them, Maya. They've worked so hard their whole lives. I suggested we could help them from our joint savings, but he dismissed the idea. That's for our emergency fund. The inheritance is different. It's extra. I stood firm, explaining that the money was for our long-term future, not for cosmetic upgrades or non-emergencies. His smile would tighten, but he'd drop it, only for the topic to resurface a few days later, repackaged in a different sob story from his mother. The perfect life I had cherished was beginning to show cracks, and I was starting to feel like a guest in my own marriage, one whose only value was the price tag attached to her name. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening. It was our 3rd anniversary, and I had cooked Rahul's favorite meal. I was hoping for a quiet, romantic night, a chance to reconnect and put the recent tension behind us, but Rahul walked in with a heavy atmosphere clinging to him. He barely touched his food, giving one-word answers to my questions. Finally, I put my fork down. Rahul, what's wrong? You've been like this for a week. He sighed, pushing his plate away. He looked not at me, but at the wall behind me. I was on the phone with my parents today. My cousin Samir is in some trouble. His business is failing, and he owes a lot of money to some very serious people. My heart sank. I knew where this was going. His cousin Samir was notorious for his failed get-rich-quick schemes. Rahul had even complained about him in the past, calling him irresponsible. They're threatening his family, Maya. His kids, Rahul said, his voice low and serious. He needs $100,000 to clear his debts or he's going to lose everything. I was sympathetic, but this was a pattern. Rahul, that's terrible, but how is that our problem? Samir has made bad choices before. It's our problem because he's family, he snapped, his voice rising. Family helps family, it's what we do. Then came the words that would change everything. You need to give him the money from your inheritance. It wasn't a request, it was a demand. The air went still. I stared at him, trying to see the man I had married, but all I saw was a stranger with cold, calculating eyes. No, I said, my voice barely a whisper, absolutely not. That money is from my grandmother. I'm not giving half of it to your cousin for his gambling debts and failed businesses. You don't understand, he yelled, standing up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the floor. This isn't a choice. My father signed a loan for Samir's business. If Samir defaults, my dad will be legally responsible. They'll lose their house. The room spun. He had never mentioned this before. He had deliberately withheld this crucial piece of information. This wasn't about helping a cousin. It was about bailing out his father. Why am I just hearing about this now? I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. Because I knew you'd react like this. So selfish, always thinking about yourself. He spat. The cruelty in his voice was a physical blow. Selfish, Rahul, this is my grandmother's legacy. It's all I have left of her. You want me to hand it over to fix a mess your family created and hid from me. His face contorted with rage. It's not your money anymore, Maya. When you marry someone, what's yours becomes theirs. It's our money and our family is in trouble. My mother was right about you. You never really cared about us. The mention of his mother was like a key turning in a lock. All her subtle digs, all her passive-aggressive comments, suddenly clicked into place. This was a coordinated effort. They saw my inheritance not as a gift to me, but as a windfall for them. The final blow came when he leaned over the table, his face inches from mine. We need the full 200,000, 100 for Samir, and the other 100 for my parents to have a safety net. They're getting old. You have a good job. You can make more money. They can't. He wanted all of it. Every last cent of the memory of my grandmother. He wanted to erase her legacy to fund his family's irresponsibility. You'll sign the transfer papers tomorrow, he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. My father is drawing them up. It was then that the grief and shock inside me crystallized into something cold and hard, resolve. The man I loved was gone, if he had ever truly existed at all. In his place was a predator, and I was his prey. But I wasn't going to be a victim. I was a data scientist. My entire career was built on finding the truth hidden in the noise, and I was suddenly very certain that there was a lot of noise, and a lot of lies, to sift through. After Rahul stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door behind him, I sat in silence for a long time. The half-eaten anniversary dinner on the table felt like a mockery. The man I had promised to spend my life with had just revealed himself to be a complete stranger, a con artist who saw me not as his partner, but as a bank account. My first instinct was to cry, to break down and mourn the life I thought I had. But the analytical part of my brain, the part that solves complex problems for a living, took over. Emotion was a liability right now. I needed data. My first call was to Aisha. I told her everything, my voice staying surprisingly steady as I recounted the conversation. She listened without interruption, and when I was done, she didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she said the one thing I needed to hear. Okay, Maya, we need a plan, but first, we need facts. His story has more holes than a block of Swiss cheese. She was right. Rahul was counting on me to be an emotional, grieving wife, too distraught to question his narrative. He had underestimated me completely. The next morning, Rahul acted as if nothing had happened. He made coffee, kissed me on the cheek, and said, I hope you slept on it. My dad will have the papers ready by this evening. His casual confidence was chilling. He truly believed he had won, that I would just roll over and sign away my future. I simply nodded, murmuring something noncommittal. I have a big project at work, I said, grabbing my laptop bag. I'll be home late. I needed space, and I needed to get to work. My first step was to secure my inheritance. I immediately called the bank that managed the estate account. I explained that I suspected potential fraudulent activity and asked them to put a freeze on all transfers. I added extra security questions and a verbal password that only I would know. The money was now locked down. It was a small victory, but it gave me a sliver of control. Next, I turned my attention to Rahul's story. A failing business, a co-signed loan, a desperate cousin. It was dramatic, but was it true? As a data scientist, I have access to certain professional tools and databases for market research, but my real skill is in knowing how to connect disparate pieces of public information. I started with Samir. I found his registered business online. It wasn't a tech startup or a promising venture. It was a luxury car rental company that had been registered 2 years ago. A quick search of public business registries showed it had been dissolved 6 months prior, with outstanding liabilities. So, the business had failed, that part was true, but the timing was interesting. It folded right around the time my grandmother passed away. The next piece of the puzzle was the loan. Rahul had claimed his father co-signed it, putting their house at risk. This was the emotional blackmail, the part designed to make me feel guilty. Getting direct bank information was illegal and impossible, but there were other ways. Property records are public. I did a search on my in-laws' address. My heart pounded as I looked at the documents. There was indeed a second mortgage taken out on their home. The date it was issued, 3 weeks ago. This wasn't some old loan for Samir's business. This was a new, recent, and very large line of credit. It had been taken out long after Samir's business had already gone under. Why would they take out a huge loan against their house 3 weeks ago if the business had already failed months before? The story wasn't adding up. Rahul and his family weren't trying to pay off an old business debt. They were trying to cover a new one. The pieces were scattered in front of me, like disorganized data points. I needed to find the pattern. I started digging into Rahul's finances. We had a joint account for household expenses, but we kept our personal savings separate. I had always trusted him with our joint finances. He was the financial advisor, after all. Logging into our shared account, I started combing through the statements for the past year, and there it was. A pattern of large, regular transfers from our joint account to a personal credit card account under his name. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there, labeled as investments or bill payments. But over the last 6 months, the amounts had grown exponentially, totaling over $30,000. It was a slow, systematic draining of our shared funds. But the final piece of evidence, the one that made my blood run cold, was a series of cash withdrawals from ATM located near a well-known casino on the outskirts of the city. Large sums, always late on a Friday or Saturday night. The truth hit me with the force of a physical impact. Samir's debt wasn't the issue. Rahul had a gambling problem, a massive, hidden, and destructive one. The money from our joint account, the new mortgage on his parents' house, it was all to cover his losses. My inheritance wasn't to save the family home from a noble, co-signed loan. It was a jackpot, a $200,000 chip to bail him out of a hole he had dug himself, with his parents as willing accomplices. The entire story was a meticulously crafted lie designed to manipulate me. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just about the money. He had built our entire marriage on a foundation of deceit. Armed with the horrifying truth, my grief transformed into a cold, calculated focus. Rahul didn't have a family crisis. He had a gambling addiction, and his parents were his enablers. They were all in on it, willing to sacrifice my inheritance, my security, and my grandmother's memory to hide his shameful secret. My mind, trained to see patterns and build predictive models, started to run a new set of calculations, how to expose them, how to protect myself, and how to make sure they faced the consequences of their actions. I knew I couldn't do it alone. I called Aisha again and laid out all my findings, the dissolved business, the new mortgage, the drained joint account, the casino withdrawals. As a journalist, her mind immediately went to evidence. Maya, this is huge, but right now it's just digital breadcrumbs. We need something concrete, something undeniable. We need proof that links the mortgage to his gambling. She was right. I had the what, but I needed the why in a format that no one could deny. Aisha suggested I hire a private investigator. It felt extreme, like something out of a movie, but she argued it was the only way to get irrefutable proof without alerting Rahul. She knew a reputable P.I. through her work, a discreet professional named Mr. Evans. The next day I met him in a quiet cafe. He was an older gentleman, unassuming and calm, which put me at ease. I gave him all the information I had, Rahul's photo, his card details, the casino locations, and the timeline of the withdrawals. I authorized him for 1 week of surveillance. It was expensive, but it was an investment in my freedom. While Mr. Evans began his work, I focused on my own front. I had to continue playing the part of the compliant, conflicted wife. It was the hardest acting job of my life. I told Rahul I was thinking and needed time. A response that frustrated him but kept him from becoming overly suspicious. His arrogance was my greatest ally. He was so sure of my weakness that he couldn't see my strength. During this time, I began meticulously documenting everything. I took screenshots of the bank statements, downloaded the property records, and saved every text message from him and his mother, pressuring me about the money. I created a timeline, linking each withdrawal to a corresponding text or a tense conversation. It was a data project from hell. I also made an appointment with a top divorce lawyer. I went on my lunch break, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. I explained the situation, presenting my file of evidence. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Ms. Albright, was impressed with my thoroughness. She advised me on the legal steps to protect myself. We discovered that since the inheritance was in my name only and I hadn't mingled it into any joint accounts, it was considered separate property in our state. He had no legal claim to it whatsoever. His entire plan was based on intimidation, not law. She advised me to keep gathering evidence. The more proof I had of his financial recklessness and deception, the stronger my position would be in the divorce proceedings. The week of surveillance felt like an eternity. Every time Rahul came home late, claiming he was working with a client, my stomach twisted. Mr. Evans provided daily updates, photos of Rahul's car in the casino parking lot, time, stamped entry and exit logs, and even discreet photos of him at the high-stakes poker tables, his face tight with stress. The man in the photos was a stranger to me, desperate, reckless, and consumed by his addiction. The final report from Mr. Evans was the nail in the coffin. It contained a detailed breakdown of Rahul's activities, including a summary of his losses for the week, which the P.I. had managed to ascertain through a source inside the casino. But the most damning piece of evidence was a short audio recording. Mr. Evans had captured a conversation Rahul had on his phone in the parking lot. The audio was clear. It was Rahul talking to his mother, Sunita. "She's still holding out, Mom," Rahul's voice said, laced with frustration. "But she'll break. She's emotional. Just keep telling her how worried you are about Dad losing the house. Lay on the guilt. We need that money to pay back the loan shark before he comes for us. The mortgage money is already gone." There it was. An explicit admission. The mortgage money wasn't for his father. It was to pay off a loan shark for his gambling debts. And his mother was not just an enabler. She was an active co-conspirator in the emotional manipulation. They were a team, and I was their mark. The recording was my silver bullet. The investigation was complete. The data was collected, cleaned, and analyzed. Now it was time to build the model for their downfall. With the P.I.'s report in my hands, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I had everything: financial records, property documents, photographic evidence, and the audio recording of Rahul conspiring with his mother. The time for passive investigation was over. It was time to design the confrontation. I didn't want a screaming match in our apartment. That's what Rahul would expect. It would give him the chance to lie, gaslight, and turn the tables on me. No, this exposure had to be public, or at least semi-public. It had to be in front of an audience he couldn't manipulate, his family. My plan began to form, elegant in its simplicity. For weeks, Sunita had been trying to organize a big family dinner. She wanted to celebrate her husband's birthday, but I knew the real reason was to create another opportunity to pressure me in a group setting, to use the force of the entire family to make me feel isolated and selfish. I had been dodging her calls, but now I saw the dinner as the perfect stage. I called her back, my voice dripping with false sweetness and apology. "Sunita, I am so sorry I've been so distant. I've been doing a lot of thinking. You're right, family is everything. I would love to come to the birthday dinner on Saturday. In fact, I have a special surprise for everyone." Her tone shifted instantly from nagging to triumphant. "Oh, Maya, dear, I knew you would come to your senses. We are so looking forward to having you." I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, assuming my surprise was the news that I was handing over the money. Let her think that. Let them all think that. Their greed would be their undoing. Next, I prepared my presentation. As a data scientist, I excel at making complex information clear, concise, and compelling. I spent 2 nights creating a detailed PowerPoint presentation. It sounds clinical, but it was the most emotional project of my life. Slide 1, a happy wedding photo of me and Rahul. Title, Our Marriage, the Story I Was Told. Slide 2, a clear, simple chart showing the systematic withdrawals from our joint account, totaling over $30,000. Title, The Hidden Drain. Slide 3, a screenshot of the public record showing the $150,000 second mortgage taken out on his parents' home. Title, The Secret Debt. Slide 4, a map showing the location of the casino with dates and times of Rahul's visits, corroborated by the PIS photos. Title, Where the Money Went. Slide 5, this was the centerpiece. A beautiful, smiling photo of my grandmother. Below it, the amount of her inheritance, $200,000. Title, My Grandmother's Legacy. Slide 6, a simple, black slide with white text. Title, The Real Plan, $200,000 bailout for a gambling addiction. I embedded the audio file of Rahul's phone call with his mother into the final slide. I loaded the presentation onto a small USB drive and tucked it into my purse. My final preparation was logistical. I had already been quietly moving my personal belongings, important documents, sentimental items, clothes, to a storage unit. Aisha had agreed to let me stay with her. On the day of the dinner, I packed a final overnight bag and put it in my car. I was not going back to that apartment. I also set up a small, discreet Bluetooth speaker in my handbag, paired to my phone which held the audio file. The presentation was a backup in case a TV wasn't available, but the audio was the star of the show. It was portable, undeniable, and could be played at the perfect moment. As I got ready for the dinner, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. I didn't see a victim anymore. I saw a woman who had been pushed to the edge and had decided to push back, armed not with anger, but with cold, hard facts. Rahul came home while I was finishing my makeup. He was in a buoyant mood, clearly sensing victory. "You look beautiful, Maya," he said, kissing my cheek. "Tonight is going to be a great night, a new beginning for all of us." I smiled back, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Yes, it is." I said, "A new beginning." He had no idea how right he was. We arrived at my in-laws' house, and the atmosphere was thick with feigned warmth. Sunita hugged me tightly, her embrace feeling more possessive than affectionate. "Maya, we are so glad you're here. We were so worried." Rahul's father, a quiet man who usually stayed in the background, patted my shoulder with a look of relief. The whole family was their aunts, uncles, even cousin Samir, the supposed source of all this trouble, who looked more smug than desperate. They were all vultures, circling what they believed was a done deal. We sat down for dinner, and the conversation was painstakingly normal for the first 20 minutes. They talked about work, the weather, and neighborhood gossip. All the while, I could feel their expectant glances. They were waiting for me to make my announcement. Rahul, sitting next to me, kept nudging my foot under the table, a silent prod to get on with it. Finally, during a lull in the conversation, Sunita clasped her hands together and looked at me with a syrupy smile. "Maya, dear, you mentioned you had a surprise for us. We are all so eager to hear it." This was my cue. The entire table went silent, all eyes on me. Rahul gave me an encouraging nod, his smile wide and confident. I took a slow sip of water, letting the tension build. "Yes, I do," I began, my voice clear and steady. "I've been doing a lot of soul searching since my grandmother passed. Her final gift wasn't just about money. It was about security, independence, and rewarding a life of hard work, and I've realized I need to honor that." Sunita's smile widened. She thought this was my preamble to handing over the cash. I also realized. I continued, my eyes locking onto Rahul's, that secrets are like a debt. They grow interest over time, and eventually they have to be paid back. A flicker of confusion crossed Rahul's face. This wasn't part of the script. I reached into my handbag and placed my phone on the table. "Rahul, you told me a story about family, loyalty, and a business loan gone wrong. But I'm a data scientist. I deal in facts, not stories. So I decided to do some fact-checking." The mood at the table shifted instantly. The smiles faltered. "What are you talking about, Maya?" Rahul asked, his voice tight. "Instead of telling you what I found." I said, looking around at all of them, "I thought it would be better to just show you." I had seen they had a large smart TV in the living room adjacent to the dining area. Actually, perhaps it's easier if we just listen. Before anyone could react, I pressed play on my phone. The small speaker in my purse was surprisingly powerful in the quiet room. Rahul's voice filled the air, clear as day. "She's still holding out, Mom, but she'll break. She's emotional. Just keep telling her how worried you are about Dad losing the house. Lay on the guilt. We need that money to pay back the loan shark before he comes for us. The mortgage money is already gone." Absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Sunita's face went white as a sheet. Rahul looked like he had been physically struck, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. The rest of the family stared, their expressions a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. I let the silence hang for a moment longer before speaking. "So, you see, the story was never about Samir's business, was it? It was about a gambling addiction. It was about draining our joint account, taking out a secret mortgage on this very house, and then trying to manipulate me into giving up my grandmother's legacy to pay off a loan shark." I stood up, my chair making a soft scraping sound. I looked directly at Sunita. "And you were his co-conspirator. You used your position as a mother to emotionally blackmail me." She started to stammer. "No, we were just trying to protect him." I interrupted, my voice dangerously low. "Or protect the family from the shame of his addiction. You were willing to ruin my life and disrespect the memory of my grandmother to do it." I then turned my gaze to Rahul. The confident, charming man was gone. In his place was a pale, terrified boy. "I have documentation of everything. The bank transfers, the property records, the PIS report with photos of you at the casino. I have it all. I placed a single key on the table, the key to our apartment. I will not be coming home. My lawyer has already drawn up the divorce papers. You will be served on Monday. Given your financial fraud during our marriage, I expect you will be very reasonable in the proceedings. After all, I'm sure your loan shark wouldn't be happy to hear that your $200,000 jackpot is no longer coming." The threat was veiled but clear. Chaos erupted. Sunita started sobbing. Rahul was yelling, calling me a liar. Samir and the others were just staring, caught in the blast zone of a bomb they didn't even know had been planted. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I turned around, walked out the front door, and didn't look back. The sound of their family imploding was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The drive from my in-laws' house to Aisha's apartment was a blur. It wasn't until I was inside her guest room, the door safely closed behind me, that the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by an overwhelming wave of relief. It was over. The lies, the manipulation, the constant weight of their expectations, it was all gone. I sank onto the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. But these weren't tears of sadness or loss. They were tears of liberation. I was mourning the end of a life I thought I wanted, but I was celebrating the beginning of a life I truly deserved. The next few days were a flurry of legal activity. As promised, MS Albright served Rahul with the divorce papers at his office. The news, coupled with the humiliation from the family dinner, apparently sent him into a tailspin. According to a mutual acquaintance, he didn't show up to work for a week. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly swift. Faced with the mountain of evidence, I had especially the proof of financial dissipation from our joint accounts and the fraudulent pretense under which he tried to claim my inheritance. Rahul had no leverage. He knew that if he fought me, I would bring his gambling addiction and the involvement of the loan shark into the official court records. The threat of that public exposure was enough. He agreed to all my terms. I didn't ask for much, only what was fair. The marriage was dissolved, and our finances were separated cleanly. My inheritance, my separate property, was never touched. The fallout in the Sharma family was catastrophic, though I only heard about it in bits and pieces. Rahul's father was furious about the secret second mortgage and the loan shark. The family, once a united front against me, fractured into factions, blaming each other for the mess. Sunita's reputation as the respected family matriarch was shattered. The last I heard, Rahul had to sell his luxury car and move back in with his parents. They were forced to deal with the loan shark on their own, and I have no doubt it was a painful and expensive process. I felt no pity for them. They had made their bed of lies, and now they had to lie in it. For me, life began anew. The first few months were about healing. I focused on my work, finding comfort in the logic and order of data. I started therapy to unpack the emotional trauma of the betrayal. I reconnected with old friends and spent weekends hiking, reading, and simply enjoying the peace of my own company. Aisha was my lifeline, a constant source of support and laughter. With the inheritance secure, I decided to honor my grandmother in a way that felt right. I used a portion of the money to create a scholarship fund at my old university for young women pursuing degrees in STEM fields. The Grandmother's Legacy Scholarship. It felt like the perfect tribute to the woman who had invested so much in my future. I wanted to pay her gift forward. I used another portion for a down payment on a small condo in a new part of the city, a place that was entirely mine, with no shared memories or ghosts of the past. It's been a year now. I still work as a data scientist, but my life feels richer and more authentic than ever before. I've learned that the most important data points are not the ones you can find on a spreadsheet, but the ones you feel in your gut. My marriage to Rahul was built on a flawed algorithm, a set of false inputs that was always destined to produce a catastrophic error. I learned to trust my own analysis of people, to see beyond the charming facade to the raw data underneath. Sometimes I think about Rahul and his family. I don't feel anger anymore, just a profound sense of detachment. They exist in a different dataset now, a part of my past that I have analyzed, learned from, and archived. My future is an open project, full of potential and new variables, and for the first time in a long time, I am the one in control of the model. I am building a life based on truth, integrity, and my own strength, and it's a life that is finally, beautifully, and logically my own.